Hey everyone, Charlene here. Today we are going to color florals. I have here Life's Sweet Moments. These are stamps and coordinating dies that are illustrated by Kelly Taylor. So I'm going to start by grabbing some alcohol marker friendly cardstock. I have a half sheet of cardstock here in my stamping platform. I'm going to stamp out several different things for my card. I'll start with the saucer as well as the teacup, and I'm also going to grab all of the florals and the foliage. I have some intense black ink, which is great for alcohol marker coloring. So I will ink up my stamps really well, then go ahead and flip and apply some good solid pressure. Go ahead and lift that up. You can see everything's stamped just fine, but I am going to do a second stamping. I always like to do at least 2 stampings to really build up how dark that black outline is on my stamped images. Go ahead and flip and press a second time and lift it up, and now I am happy with how everything looks. For my first floral, I'm going to be using R0.6, 0.5, and 0.4. I'm starting off with the 0.6, which is the darkest, and I'm going to bring this around the edge of any petal that is supposed to be in front of another petal. So you can see I'm going around that first petal that's kind of sticking out, and then I'm also going around the other petal there to the right. I'll do that all the way around the flower on each of the petals, making sure to do a full line. Then I'm bringing in the R0.5 and I'm going to run that along the edge of the 0.6. I'm not going to completely cover the 0.6. I'm just going to go right along the edge of it. That's going to help pull that color out and help the shadow to blend out. Once I've gone over those lines, I'm going to take my 0.5 and I'm going to bring it along the edge of any of the places where the petals curl over. So I do want there to be some shading there, but I don't want it to be quite as dark as the shading that I've used to indicate that one petal is on top of another one. Still with that 0.5, I'm going to bring some more shading lines along where it's indicated that there's kind of a fold or a natural bend in the petals. I usually look to the illustration to see where the lines have been drawn on the stamp, and that's where I decide to place my lines, keeping in mind kind of what a natural fold would look like on a petal. It's kind of looking like a frankenflower at the moment, but this will definitely blend out and look more natural once you've gone through and colored everything. I'm also going to bring the 0.5 all the way around the center of the floral. Now that I have my shading done, I'm going to bring in 0.4, which is almost my lightest color, and I'm going to run it along the edge of all of those lines, going around the entire flower. I like to do this petal by petal, and that way I don't lose track of what petal I'm working on. Lastly, I'll bring in my R0.3, so this is the lightest of the reds, and I'm going to color in any remaining open space on the petals. So this is going to be my highlight areas of the petals. You could leave your floral just like this with one round of coloring, but if you want your color to be bolder and get a nicer blend, just repeat the whole process a second time. So that's what I'm going to do. After that second time, you can really see how it helps. It brings the color to life and makes it much more bold. For my next floral, I'm going to do the same type of process. I'm using OR 1.6 for my dark, and I'm starting by going around the petals that would be in front. Remember, it does look a little scary at first, but don't worry, it turns out. I'll bring in OR 1.3 and running it along the edge of everywhere that I put the 1.6. I'll use that same 1.3, and now I'm going to indicate where any of those creases or folds in the petal are. Again, looking towards what the illustrator has done, in this case what Kelly has done, to indicate that there would be a fold in the petal. I'll take the same 1.3 and go around the center of the entire flower. Then I'll switch over to 1.2, my next lightest color, and I will run this along the edges everywhere that I have those prior colors. You'll be left with just a small bit of a spot in various places for a highlight. So I'm bringing in 1.1 and I'm just gonna pull that down and into the flower, blending it out in all of those open areas. I'll do everything a second time to build up the color and help define those petals. So here is our finished second floral. For the next floral, I'm going to color this in purple. So I have some V 2.7 to start out with. Again, I'm going to run it along the edges of the petals that would be in front of other petals. I'll move on to 2.6 and run a thin line of that along the edges of the 2.7. I'll also take the 2.6 around the center of the flower and then along those natural fold lines where they would be on the petals. My next lightest color is 2.4 and I'll run this along the edges of anywhere where I use the 2.6. Now I have 2.3 and I'm going to color in the remainder of the petals. I'll repeat this a second time, and actually while I'm repeating it, I'm going to leave even less space for those highlight areas to help things blend. So I'm much happier now. It doesn't have as many highlight spots. Next, I'm going to make a pink flower. I'm going to start with RV 0.4, taking it along the edges of the petals that would be in the front. Sometimes the spaces you are working with are really small and you'll have just a short little fleck to indicate where that petal is. In other areas, you might have a longer line. Next, I'm bringing in RV 0.2. I'll run that along the edges of the 0.4 lines that it created. I'll also bring it out from the center and I'll run it along the edges where the folds in the petals would be. My highlight color is going to be RV 0.1, so I will color in the remaining areas. I'm not using 4 colors on this flower. The petals are just a little too small for that. I'll repeat that a second time to build up the color again and intensify the shading. So here's our finished pink flower. For the next flower, I'm going to go back to the red family, only I'm going to start with the darkest color as 0.4. So I'm going to start here by figuring out which petals would be in front. And sometimes it can be a little tricky to tell which ones are in front. On this flower in particular, there's not really a true front petal. It's more like each petal overlaps the next one. So I'm essentially going on the right hand side of each of the flower petals. I'll bring in 0.3 and blend that out, going around the center with that same 0.3 and then also taking the 0.3 to show where any of the petal folds would be. I've got 0.2 to blend out all of those lines that we've created so far. And for the highlights, I'm using 0.1. I'll repeat that a second time, and this time I'll leave a little less room for the highlight. All right, finish that floral. For our last flower, I'm going to use some yellow oranges. I'll start here with 2.5, which may seem like it's really dark, but it's actually going to blend out a lot in this process and not look so dark when you're finished. Changing it up a little bit, I've got my darkest as what I'm going to bring around the center of the flower. Bringing in 2.3, I'll run that right along the edges of those lines. And then I'll take the 2.3 and create the spaces where the folds are in the petal. I'll bring in 2.2 and again run that along all of the lines that I've created, leaving a space for a highlight. That highlight I'm going to do with Y 2.0, so now I'll color in any remaining white spaces on the floral. I'm also going to color this center area of the flower with the 2.0. Going to repeat that a second time. Here's our finished yellow flower. I'm a big fan of yellow greens when it comes to foliage. So for my stems, I'm going to use 1.6 as my dark, and I'm going to run this right underneath where the stem meets the flower. Then I'll bring in YG 1.4 and I'll blend that out, and then 1.2 to finish off the stem. Now, a lot of this is not going to show in the finished card, but I wasn't sure how much would, so I always color everything. I repeated that a second time as well. I'll use the same YG colors for the remaining foliage for my leaves. When I'm working with small leaves, I like to bring my darkest, the 1.6, in from the tops and the bottoms of the leaves to give them a natural bend in the center. I have my 1.4 and I'm slightly overlapping the 1.6 and I'm pulling it in towards the center of the leaves. I am leaving a small open space, which now I'll come in with the 1.2 for the highlight and flick it back and forth on those leaves. This is such a nice way to color leaves. I really love it. So I do that a second time, and I'm going to do the same colors on the other two sets of leaves. For my cup, I'm going to go with the same color scheme that I did for this top floral up here. So I'm going to start with our 0.4 as my darkest shade. Now our cup is convex, so it curves out. I'm going to start by bringing the 0.4 about 1/4 of an inch out on each side, and that's going to taper as it goes down towards the bottom of the cup. And that's because you want to kind of keep the shading line straight up and down as it goes in towards your cup. So larger at the top and decreasing as you go down. I'm doing it on both sides. I have 0.3 and I'm going to slightly overlap, and I'm going to bring this out about 1/4 to 1/2 of an inch. Later you're going to see I end up bringing it out even farther. I have 0.2 and I'm going to take this all the way to the center, just leaving a tiny little bit of white space in the center. I'll fill in the white space there with 0.1. I'm not super happy at this point, but you can always adjust when you do your second layer of coloring. So I want there to be less of a difference between the coloring here, so I'm going to bring out the 0.3 a lot farther on this round. I'll start again with my 0.4 and going about 1/4 of an inch out on each side. Switching over to that 0.3, and here is where you'll see how much farther I'm going to bring it out. I'm going to bring it out quite a bit. I didn't feel like I needed anything more than the 0.2 for a highlight, so I'll bring it back and forth through the center. I'm much happier with this. I'm going to actually do it one more time to even make it a better blend here. Third time's the charm. I feel like we really got a nice blend now with the highlight towards the center. It's going to continue to blend as it dries. For the handle at the base, as well as the top part that comes out from the cup, I'm going to use some 0.4. Then I'll switch over and pull that out with some 0.3. And I'm going to bring that 0.3 all the way around the inner edge of the handle. Then I'll bring in 0.2 to color in the remainder of the handle. And to add even more shading here, I'm going to bring a bit of the 0.4 around that inner handle edge. Then switch to the 0.3, leaving just a small space for the 0.2, where I'll come along all the way along that outside edge of the handle. For the saucer, I'm doing all of our highlights as if a light was shining directly onto things. That's how I tend to color in general. I find it much easier to remember how to do my highlights by kind of keeping a standard way that I color. So I'm going to pretend like the highlight's in the center. So I'll start with 0.4 coming in along the edges of that front part of the saucer. This is very similar to how I did the coffee cup. I'm also going to bring a line underneath the lip of the saucer, as well as coming in from the sides on that bottom portion. I'll switch to my 0.3 and I'm going to color in all of the open space on the bottom. And for that middle portion there, I'm going to bring it in almost to the center, but leave a little bit of a spot for a highlight, which I will bring my 0.2 in to color. The top of the saucer is actually trickier than the rest of this. It's going to be the most lit area up top, and it's actually going to be kind of darker down towards the bottom rim. There's going to be a little bit of a shadow coming in from behind that front lip. To show that shadow, I'll use a line of 0.3 coming all the way along that front edge. Then I'll blend it out with 0.2 coming all the way along that 0.3, just slightly overlapping it again and coloring then the remainder of the saucer. I'll go ahead and repeat that to build up the color. And then I want to point out that once I place my cup on here, I am going to come back and add a little bit of shading underneath the cup. but because I don't know where the cup is going to sit yet, I'm going to wait and do that later. I've finished with all of my coloring. I'll come in with my dies now and get them on here with some Low-Tack tape. I've taped everything in place, and you might be thinking, wow, that's so much tape. But it really actually isn't. These rolls of highlighter tape, or EZC tape is what they're called as well, they last me quite a long time and they never tear my paper. I've been using this tape for years and it is my go-to. For my background, I'm going to use this beautiful new embossing folder. I have a half sheet of white cardstock here that I'm going to use with it. And this is called Soulful Season. I'll run this through my die cutting machine. So I have it set on the platform piece, and then I have my D adapter plate on top as I run it through. And you can see here that it creates this really beautiful textured background. I've trimmed my panel down to 4 1/4 inches by 5 1/2 inches, so it's A2 sized. And now I'll come in and arrange all of my pieces how I think I want them on the card. Once I've arranged everything on the front, I'm going to start by taking the topmost piece, and I'll decide piece by piece if I want it to be popped up or if I want to glue it directly. So I know that I want this flower here to be popped up. So I'll just add one piece of foam tape on there. I can always go back and add more if I need to once it's all put together, and I'll pop this back down. I'll add some glue here to the back of this leaf piece, and I'm gonna adhere it back behind the cup, but it's gonna be attached to another flower. To adhere this flower, I'm actually gonna add glue to the leaf that I just placed back there, and then I'll kind of shimmy my flower in there. All of this is just a way to temporarily tack all of my pieces in place because I'm going to add a bunch of glue on the back once I'm all done. So I'll go through and do the same thing with all of the rest of the florals and the leaves. I have everything held in place and I know where I want my cup to be on the saucer. So I'm going to bring back in that R0.3, just slightly shift my cup up so that I can create a small line that's essentially going to run right underneath where my cup is. Then I'll bring in my R0.2 and I'll run that underneath the line, kind of blending it out to help it look more natural. Now I can add some glue here right above that shading line, and I can take my lovely floral cut piece here and hold it in place as it dries. After all of that work, now I can finally add glue to the back. I'm going to add glue to several of the areas, not all of them though, because some I'm going to want to tuck in foam squares in order to help pop them up. So I'll line this up here with the center of the background and then pop it down. I did have this one leaf that didn't really attach to anything on the cup, so I knew I'd need to tuck it in once I was done. So I've added some glue to the back and popped it back behind there. Now I can come in with small foam squares and tuck them in here and there, and that's going to really help to make our piece come to life and have fun dimension. So I'm adding one here back behind the pink flower, and I'm going to add some back behind the orange flower. I'll tuck one in back behind the red flower. I'll do the same thing at the top of the purple flower, and also one back behind this yellow flower. So this gives us a fun 3D look on the card. Next here I have an A2 sized card base. I'm going to put this into my scoring tool, and I'm going to use a piece of Low-Tack tape in the corner just to hold it in place while I'm doing this. I have some really strong double-sided adhesive tape. This is what I like to use when I am adhering an embossed panel to a card front. So I'll remove the release tape on all of these, and then I can just take my completed panel and butt it up against the sides and drop it right over the top of the card base. This would look gorgeous like this, but I'm actually going to go ahead and stamp out the tea bag from the same set. For my sentiment, I have here the Hello Sweet Tea stamps. I'm using Sending Positivity. And I have some intense black ink. I'm going to stamp these out, just making sure to get a good amount of ink on my stamps. So I will flip, press, lift, and always with my second stamping. So flip, press, lift To color my tea bag, I'm not doing a lot here. I'm starting with some 04.3 and I'm going to color in the back and bottom areas that give us the 3D look to the bag. I'll also color underneath the top triangle piece, as well as the line that goes across the top of the tea bag. Then I'll bring in some 04.1 and I'll blend out all of those areas, and I'll also bring it in just a little bit from each side of the tea bag. Then I'll transition into my 04.0 and I'm going to bring it in pretty much all the way towards the center, just leaving a tiny bit of white, and I will bring that same 4.0 along the top of the triangle as well. I'm going to add a little pop of pink here on the tag, so I've got some RV 0.2, and I will cut these out here now with the coordinating dies. I'll add glue here to the back of the tea bag, and I'm going to line this up underneath the yellow flower so that it runs along the same angle as the curve of our cup. I've added some foam tape to the back of my sentiment, and I'm going to put it here on the right because it'll balance out that tea bag. Now you probably noticed I did not color in any of the centers of my florals. That's because I was saving it until last. I just wasn't sure what color I wanted them to be, but now that I see everything all put together, I've decided on yellow. To add a little bit of bling, I've tucked in a few of the Homestead Hues gem stickers, and I'm going to add a little more texture to my tea bag here just by adding a couple dots of 04.3 in each of the corners. So here is our finished card with all of that beautiful coloring. I love the dimension on this card. It's got a little bit of bling, so good. All right, everyone, I hope you picked up some tips and tricks today. Please be sure to like and subscribe, as well as hit that notification bell so that you'll know about future videos here on the Honeybee Stamps YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.